Welcome to Business Morning. The Bureau of Public Enterprises recently officially launched bidding for about 10 distribution companies, and we saw some top contenders on that list. And at the end of the bidding process, I was around Tuesday, 16th of this month, some top contenders emerged, getting about 4 of the power distribution companies. Now, a number of issues were raised. We did hear also some of the state governors rejecting the outcome of that particular bidding process. Other questions that have been raised was how, in terms of pricing, how were these assets priced? Because we're told that the federal government is meant to make around 400 billion now out of the sale of the assets of this distribution companies. Well, some others allege that these assets are worth, over a trillion now. Well, we have been following this story very closely, and one of our correspondents, Olu Phillips, put a report together on the BP's reaction to all the allegations, all the criticisms that trailed the outcome of that particular bid process. Let's take a listen.
Just when the process of privatizing the generation and distribution companies in the power sector seemed on the verge of completion, it has come under very heavy criticisms. 11 electricity distribution companies were up for commercial bids. 16 consortia participated. But with reference to the Benin Distribution Company, the governors of Edo, Delta and Ekiti States say the entire process was fraught with corruption. Here in this room, with the members of the National Council on Privatization, the technical committee chair is responding to those allegations.
On the allegation that the bid process was not transparent, I wholeheartedly affirm that the entire transaction followed due process and was governed by the provisions of the RFP. Incidentally, the submissions made by the Southern Consortium to the BPE show that the ownership of the consortium is comprised of 7 members. Therefore, close to 90% of this consortium is therefore owned by private sector companies that are not owned directly or indirectly by the governments of Delta, Edo, Ekiti, and Ondo states.
According to Mr. Atedo, Southern Consortium, which represented the aggrieved state, has been a part of the entire process and never complained before now.
Seeking to rewrite the rules after a game has been played is unacceptable and certainly does not conform to global best practice. Likewise, accusations of corruption, which are not based on the provision of an iota of evidence, are also unacceptable.
On the allegation of lack of competence by Vigil, which emerged for the Benin Disco, the council says 3 evaluation teams examined the technical bids and all requirements were met.
The EFCC, the ICPC, and the SSS also observed the entire process from bid submission to the conclusion of evaluation. Bids were assigned to the evaluating teams by balloting to ensure that no evaluator had any prior knowledge of which bid he or she would evaluate. Some of the criteria evaluated were experience in operation and maintenance of distribution companies, experience in developing countries, technical and investment plan, management and staffing, and finally, financing plan and ability to raise finance.
The power sector is undergoing reforms. That alone has raised mixed reactions. Government say it means well for the sector, but arguments in other quarters suggest that the sector borders on national security and should be carefully treated. There is a common ground, however. Power needs to be improved in the country for any meaningful development to happen. Olu Phillips, Channels Television News.
Well, I still have in the studio here with me, Joseph Inyang, president of Nigeria for Super Energy and Advocacy Group, pushing for energy sufficiency in the country. Thank you so much, Inyang, Joseph, for being here. Now, we do, of course, we have a list of the contenders. We have a list of the distribution companies, those who emerged winners, as it were, as they're being called now. Now, there have been different reactions, especially from the governors. As an advocacy group, I know you have your eyes constantly on power reforms, especially this latest development. What do you make from the bidding process and the outcome?
Again, thanks for having me on board. Really, when you take a look at the process that has been going back, and as a group, our advocacy has always been to have a national decentralized grid, same as you have in the US, which means that government can participate as well as business can participate. The other thing too is that if we truly have a national decentralized grid, the governors of each state actually become midwives in delivering power to their people, as well as each state has also its national regulatory electrical agency to manage it. That's what happens. The problem we are facing now is a problem that, because we've not followed that line where the federal government is there in the center, managing and helping midwife the process. The state governors are there also managing and midwifing the process for their citizens within the states to have power. That's where we are having those things, because this shouldn't arise.
So
the state governor really saying that we have interest, vested interest, to take care of our people, and we can't do it because the federal government is pulling the strings.
Okay, so what would be an ideal situation? Okay, you're saying the federal government is in a way, state governments are in a way, it's not an ideal situation. How would it, what other situation could we have?
Again,
taking into consideration the Nigerian context, you know.
Yeah. I mean, again, we're itching up to where we will get there, where the states will actually take responsibility of trying to deliver power to their people. Because today in Nigeria, apart from corruption, the most important thing that the states, whether federal or the state government, needs to deliver to its people is power. When you deliver that, we'll stop having people die in hospitals, we'll stop having people who cannot feed their families because they do not have power. The whole thing goes there. We're losing more lives today due to the lack of energy than we are to cancer, to malaria, to everything, because that is really what fuels the economy and also fuels people's lives. So the governors should have a vested interest in making sure that their citizens have power to be more productive.
Well, let's look at one other issue that was raised was pricing of these assets. The BP has come out to say that, okay, we insist that the process was transparent and fair, you know, regardless of what the governors or some of the people are saying. But they didn't exactly come out to tell us, okay, this was how, in terms of pricing, because here we have an estimate of about 400 billion now to be made from the sale of the assets. And then some members of the PHCN or staff are saying that, look, these assets are worth much more than the federal government is selling them for, over between 1 to 3 trillion. Now, do you think perhaps that we should have that also in the public layer, that this is how we priced these assets?
I think, yes, we should actually find out how the assets were priced. One of the things with asset pricing is always very funny. We go back to NITEL. When you overprice an asset, which is actually to the benefit of the citizens, then you may be overpricing it. Really, what we should be focusing on is, number one, making sure that the companies that are going to deliver power to the country, whether government or private-owned companies, need to deliver power, one. Number two, the metering of power needs to be implemented. For a long time, we've been promised that every citizen would have a meter. It has not happened.
Well, I wanted to believe that that was a work in process. It was introduced on the 1st of June this year.
Yes.
And we're not sure in terms of figures how much, what percentage of the population has been captured in terms of, metering those who have been given meters. But I would imagine that that process is still ongoing. The
process is still ongoing, but it's slow. And it has not happened. And really what we advocate is, this is your price when you have reached a certain milestone, as opposed to here is your pricing before you reach the milestone. That is really what needs to happen, because that's really when Nigerians will actually be more accommodating of price increases in the power sector.